I want to welcome in Todderick, who covers college football recruiting and is an analyst for New Jersey Advanced Media. Also, scout for ESPN and News 12 Varsity down in the state of New Jersey. Todderick, definitely appreciate your time.
No doubt, man. Thanks for having me.
So the reason why I wanted to reach out to you, I saw you put up on Twitter or social media yesterday talking about UConn football's recruiting strategy. And you're mentioning they're hitting New Jersey hard as signing day approaches, offering guys that are very talented yet maybe under the radar. Want to ask you about some of those guys a little later on, but what are you seeing in terms of UConn's approach in your state?
Well, I mean, there certainly seems to be, like you said, offering guys that do have a lot of talent, but for whatever reason don't necessarily, maybe fit the overall criteria to be, high offer guys. Something that, Temple used to do, get guys like if you look at it from the standpoint of the perfect FBS recruit, each guy may be missing one thing, but they encompass all the other things that you need. And usually if you can get 90% of those things and you're just missing that one thing, you can kind of bet on that, and that's pretty good money for you.
Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these guys play. Currently, UConn has 2 commits from the state of New Jersey, Ryan Dickens and most recently Ryan Vandermark, an offensive lineman from the Hun School. Can you speak to any of those 2? Have you seen them play? And Ryan Vandermark especially, big offensive lineman, getting some experience at Hun.
Yeah, I've seen both guys play. I've also seen both guys in a camp setting. Both were at the satellite camp at the Hun School, and I've seen highlight tape and also seen them play in person. As for Ryan, he's an absolute pest on the defensive side of the ball, makes a ton of plays. He's slightly undersized, but can really fly around, stick his nose in, and finish. Great form tackler, good instincts, tough kid, blue-collar kid, can read and diagnose and get to the football and finish. So you love those guys, and in this day and age with all these spread offenses, linebackers are smaller. You see a lot of guys that would have 10, 15 years been safeties moving closer to the football in order to get good matchups against those slot receivers and those twitchy guys underneath. So I think he could play down the line once he physically develops. Ryan Vandermark, is really a prototypical offensive tackle who just boomed late. Played his high school ball at Wayne Valley, experienced a growth spurt late in his high school career from his junior to senior years into his PG year at the Hun. So when Coach Todd Smith got him after his high school career, he had this huge body, was still kind of growing into it and having all these different things come together. So we mentioned, when I saw him preseason prior to his postgraduate year, watching him at that Hun camp earlier in the camp season, you saw the size, you saw the tools, but, he got beaten some of those one-on-ones. You could see that he was still a work in progress and that Todd hadn't really gotten his hands on him. Now Todd Smith's a really highly respected coach, does a really good job with the offensive and defensive line. That's what he does best. Saw him a little bit later in the year at Rutgers East Coast Elite Camp towards the end of the summer, and he was a completely different player. Not only did he have that size at about, 6'8", 6'9", 285 or whatnot, he was a player. He had learned how to set. He wasn't oversetting like he was earlier in the year. He played with patient hands and just really started to utilize his tools and gifts. And you saw that spill over to the season where he had a really nice year teamed up with Fred Hansard and some of the other bigs they have over there at the Hun.
Now, UConn head coach Bob Diaco is a New Jersey native. I know he sticks to a lot of his roots. I know he recruited the state back when he was at Notre Dame. What are you hearing? I know that UConn struggled on the field over the last season, 3-9 record. What are you hearing about the UConn staff from coaches in New Jersey and when they go out and recruit these kids?
Well, there's certainly a difference of opinion. I was speaking to one staff that yesterday that was disappointed that UConn had offered their players. But at the same time, you see the push that they're making, offering, upwards of 10 guys for the past month or so up throughout the state. So they're certainly looking to make a statement yet. They're not going to be pushed to recruit that they don't believe fit into their system. I think that's something that Diaco has done. Been very specific about really instilling his will and his way of doing things on that entire staff and that staff's personality. They certainly are a unique staff. They do things their own way. They trust in their own evaluations as opposed to, what rivals think makes sense, or Scout or 247. That's one thing I can certainly say about them. They make their own evaluations and judgments, and have offered a lot of kids first, although late in the process, which tells you a lot. They're not worried about what everybody else is offering, who everybody else is offering, or thinks is the hot names. They really depend upon what they see on tape, getting those kids on campus and feeling out if those kids are the right fit for their program.
Now, one of those under-the-radar kids that stood out to me just reviewing tape, running back Jordan Scott. What can you say about him? I know he's a small guy. I think he's only 5'7", but he looks electrifying on tape.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a tremendous speed, and not just straight line. He's got some underneath quickness, can stick his foot in the ground, change direction, get up the field. He's a playmaker. Definitely, undersized as far as the traditional guy, FBS caliber guy. But over the past 5-6 years, you've still got 7'5", 8 pick up those FBS offers. I know when I was in high school, the big trend was the big running backs, the 6'2", 220-pound guys. The big linebackers, the 6'3", 230-pound guys, 240-pound guys, the Andy Katzenmoyer types, the Eddie George type running backs. But now you're seeing those smaller guys being utilized as the game has turned to a faster game, and the smaller players are getting opportunities and excelling with them. So I think you'll see more and more of guys not fit the traditional mold of how big you have to be to play at that level. I think Jordan Scott is right in that group and certainly has the ability to have a chance to have a productive collegiate career.
And then there's two guys that UConn offered early in the recruiting process. I'm not sure if UConn's in play anymore. Running back Jonathan Lovett, I know, just recently picked up an offer from Michigan State. And then wide receiver Marquise Ball, I know he was a Rutgers commit, decommitted recently. Are you hearing anything about those two on where they're leaning?
Well, Jonathan Lovett was actually the player committed to Rutgers who decommitted. He did just pick up a Michigan State offer. If I had to bet, I would guess that he ends up back at Rutgers at the end of the day. I think Penn kind of started this whole thing by offering him while he was committed to Rutgers. Lovett's girlfriend goes to Penn State, so that that definitely gave them somewhat of an edge. He got up there for a game, an impressive victory for Penn State, so obviously that ties into some of the allure to go there. But the most interesting thing about that is, they're not having him take his official visit until late January, which is interesting to me because I feel like when you really want a guy, I feel like there's a good chance that he would have committed it if he had already taken that official visit. So you got to kind of wonder where things stand with that. I know Iowa was another major player, but he recently took a Rutgers official visit where he was hanging out with a bunch of the other committed Rutgers guys, and I've heard some good things about that post, and a lot of guys that are currently committed to RU feel they get him back in the fold. As far as Marquise Bell out of Bridgeton, he hasn't committed to anyone just yet. He was he's taken a couple official visits. I know he's been to Rutgers already, Virginia Tech. I believe he's already taken an official to Maryland, but it was an impromptu visit to Maryland a couple weeks back. That was an unofficial thing in which he basically just showed up unannounced. And I'm hearing some good things about the visit, sort of putting them over the top. He's a kid that wants to stay close to home, raised by his grandmother, wants to stay close by. And a lot of these coaching staffs believe he has what it takes to play on Sundays, and so do I. So it'll be interesting to see how the chips fall, but I expect him to commit to the University of Maryland at the Under Armour All-American game.
And a final question for Todderick Hunt, who's scout and analyst down in the state of New Jersey, covers high school football. There's several other guys that recently picked up some offers from UConn as well. Owen Kessler's one, Brendan DeVera, I know was a commit to UNH. And then running back Chris Chukwuneke, he also stood out to me on tape. Do you think those guys have a shot to go to UConn?
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance those guys pick UConn. I mean, I'd expect Brendan DeVera potentially to commit on his official visit. Obviously, it depends upon what else he picks up between now and then, but I think there's a good chance that happens. I think Chris Chukwuemeka, there's a good chance that he picks UConn, depending upon, again, what comes in between now and when he decides to make his decision. Chukwuemeka is actually a kid that came through my youth football program, the North Edison Shamrocks, so I'm highly familiar with him and his situation and definitely believe he's a 1A talent, and I'm super happy for him that he's finally gotten a 1A opportunity. I know he's had some other postgraduate opportunities as well, but I always felt he'd eventually get to that 1A level, so that's certainly good for him. A twitchy player. There's a lot of great things on the offensive side of the ball, but is also very impressive at safety, making open field tackles, gets guys on the ground. Did a real nice job one-on-one against Kareem Walker as a junior, and I believe that was the Group 2 or Group 3 finals, in which they lost the game, but he certainly was a player that stood up against the competition. And who was that third player you asked about again?
Defensive end Owen Kessler from Westfield.
Yes, Kessler actually covered in his state final game just a couple weeks back, and he's an absolute terror off the edge. Has good size at about 6'2", great step, probably arguably the, or at least one of the top pass rushers in our great state this past season. I believe he had about 15 sacks, 40 to 50 tackles, a ton of plays behind the line of scrimmage, and just did a real nice job setting the edge, also playing the run. I know he had a preferred walk-on opportunity from Rutgers. I think there's a handful of schools that could potentially offer him late if he's still open. But as of right now, I'd expect him to eventually pick UConn as well.
Well, Todderick, definitely appreciate the time sharing some insight into the landscape of college football recruiting in the state of New Jersey. And if you're open to it, I'd definitely like to have you back at some point throughout the year to catch up on the goings-on in New Jersey recruiting.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you so much for having me.